taken that life lesson. I wish I had learned that probably a little earlier on in life, but that one was where I think I really started to grasp the concept of like, let's stop worrying about all this stuff, all this noise that I can't do anything about, and really start focusing on like, all right, how do I move forward? How do we win?
Welcome, everybody, to the Doing the Work podcast. I am super excited for this episode. I'm here with my buddy Ian Oliver, who is a former Army officer and just a great human being. And I'm excited to kind of get to know him and dive into some stuff conversations we've had in the past, you and I have had in the past, that I'd like to kind of bring onto the show. So welcome to the show, Ian.
Hey, thanks, Ethan. I really appreciate it. Excited to be on here. I feel honored. I'm just a regular guy, so I'm pretty excited to be on here. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, you're way more than a regular guy. So you've inspired me and taught me things, and I know that the people listening are going to get something out of it too. I always like to do a little bit of a kind of getting to know you, so people can kind of understand who you are and where you're coming from, and then we'll get in. We'll just see where it takes us. So let's start with the basics. Where were you born? Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Western North Carolina, a little town called Newton, North Carolina. It's kind of near Hickory, if you know the area. But yeah, I grew up, had a really great family. Loved to spend some time outdoors. Kind of grew up in the outdoors, doing a lot of backpacking, playing sports. Um, I got pretty involved in a couple different sports in high school. One of which I played football. I was a kicker in high school, and allowed me the opportunity to go to college and played at the like D1 level as a kicker for a little bit. Ended up transferring to Appalachian State, and that is where I graduated from. But yeah, really just kind of grown up in this area and loved being outdoors, you know, uh, and playing sports. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lately I've been really into like, I guess just being a dad and now having, I have adult children and have younger children, and thinking about, childhood. And so like, how would you describe your childhood? What would you say, were like some of the, good, bad, indifferent kind of aspects of your childhood that make you who you are?
Yeah, my parents had this like I guess goal for us to always like have some sort of direction. Like they knew we were going to be pretty high energy. So there was like an effort to always have us involved in some sort of sport. Just like kind of a funny parenting thing. My dad had struggled with weight most of his life, and he had this idea he didn't want to have fat kids, right? So not to uh, but like we weren't allowed to play baseball growing up because it was too sedentary, right? So we were like pigeonholed into like the running sports and stuff like that. So we
Yeah.
played a lot of soccer and stuff growing up. But my dad was an Eagle Scout. He grew up in the mountains, and so a lot of our like family weekends were spent backpacking, doing like 3 and 4 day trips out in the backcountry and really getting to know mommy nature and spending some time out there. So I've had a great love for the outdoors since I was young. That's something my parents really instilled in us. But yeah, I don't nothing. I don't think anything too exciting or out of the norm. I grew up. I had an older brother. He's about a year older than me, and a younger sister. It's about 3 years younger than I am. Like I said, we all were pretty involved in sports growing up. That was sort of like a real focus of ours. Um, and yeah, had the opportunity to do quite a few things and travel around the country playing sports. So
What
yeah.
do you think that the outdoors and sports taught you in terms of, character, values, things like that?
I think probably one of the first thing that comes to mind is like being part of a team and like you know putting the team first or being part of something bigger than yourself is certainly one that like comes to mind. I would definitely say, I did a lot of hard stuff, like being really like uncomfortable, both physically and mentally being really uncomfortable. So, um, going forward in life, like being able to lean on some of those experiences of doing really hard things and knowing that you could do them, and being able to accomplish those things as a team or individually, I think is a super valuable life skill that we had growing up.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything harder, honestly. That's what, I encourage, my kids to play sports for the same reasons, right? Like, I don't really care if they are good athletes or if they have like athletic accomplishments. But I think that, like, what you hit on just a second ago is, the types of things that you learn from playing sports and how it helps you to develop as a human being. And outdoors is the same way. Like I'm like you. Like my version of like a great vacation is throwing a backpack on my back and disappearing in the woods for like a week or two.
Right.
Because of the just the groundedness and the humility that comes from like being in some, like you said, something much bigger than you, like so vast and just completely amazing. And but going to the sports thing is it's like how do you deal, teaching kids how you deal with failure and how you deal
Hmm.
with not not being the best at everything all the time, or like the whole world not revolving around you as an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I was never. I think I was a decent athlete growing up, but I was never the best, right? And I was always kind of small growing up too. So I always felt like I had to work harder than a lot of my peers, I would say. But yeah, I think there's another like aspect that, maybe you can be fortunate or unfortunate in, but having coaches growing up as a kid, you can have some good coaches, you can have some bad ones, but I was pretty fortunate. I did have some really good coaches growing up, good mentors that, um, they'll teach you life skills that can really be applied, for the rest of your adult life, finding ways to handle really stressful situations and how do you tune out all the noise and really focus in on completing a task or making that next play. High stress situations, how do you calm your nerves, things like that. So yeah, there is a lot more to playing sports than just getting out there and being healthy and active. I would absolutely say.
Yeah, those relationships that you just mentioned, like one of my um my like parts of my purpose is meaningful community or like deep human connections, and like you
Hmm.
really touched on that for me, right? Like it's like those relationships that you have, those connections that you have, those people who take you give of themselves to you for no other reason than um that it was the right thing to do, or that they got something out of giving. you know um there's just nothing better than, in my opinion, there's just like that's what it's all about for me you know
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I think it, for whatever reason, I guess it's becoming more rare. But yeah, like creating those deep relationships with people that you can only make through, spending a weekend in the woods with someone, like that those bonds that you make with people on a sports team doing really hard stuff together and working through those failures and victories together, um, creates a relationship with your people, your community, your team that it just isn't found, in a classroom,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Well,
Right.
yeah, and how else? I mean, I think about this a lot, right? Like there's just some things that cannot be learned in any other way than through experience and hardship and difficulty. And on one hand, that kind of sucks. Like you don't want people to have to go through like really hard things, but on the other side of it is like, think I'm so grateful that people get those opportunities and that they've because the world's better for having people who understand hardship, and then the opposite, how to create ease.
Yeah, I feel like my life has been full of alternate plans, right? Like I had these, and I always had a plan of what I wanted to do or what I wanted to accomplish, and um, whether it was failure or God had another plan for me to go do. It was I wouldn't go back and change anything in terms of like how I went through life, like all those failures or deviation from the plan that I had were all for the better. They have made me into the man I am today, the father I am today. They're super important life experiences that you've got to go through.
Yeah. Well, you've piqued my interest. What are some of the ones that are standing out for you in terms of, okay, you had this plan and then something happened and derailed that plan, and like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I've got a couple good ones. So the first would have been so I in high school um, I guess going into high school I was really focused on soccer. That was like my sport at the time, and um, I want to say it was maybe my like sophomore year of high school. We had the football coach came down to our soccer team and it was like, hey, does anyone like can anyone kick the football? We need a kicker for our football team. And at the time, I was taking a lot of our place kicks and stuff like that in on our team, and so I got voluntold or whatever. I thought it was going to be something cool to go do, right? And so I got into kicking the football and I got pretty good at it, and um, just the kind of the way things work when you're trying to get into to play at the collegiate level, you really have this timeline between your junior and senior year. There's a summer that like that's the time you got to get in front of scouts and you got to go to these camps and showcase yourself. And I did a pretty terrible job at taking care of my body when I was a 16, 17-year-old kid. I didn't, I probably, I know I didn't understand it. Two, I just, I didn't want to listen either. You think you know everything and you think you're invincible. And anyway, I ended up getting pretty injured. I had like I tore my groin. I had a messed up back, all this stuff. So my summer that I was supposed to go out and showcase, it kind of got all scrapped because I was pretty banged up. And so anyway, I thought I was going to go to some Power Five school, and that kind of goes out the window when you miss that window, because then they go out and these schools they find who they need for the next season, they offer them the scholarship, and so I got left. I had a really great senior year, but was kind of like going after what was left, and where could I walk on? I put all this work into this thing, like I've got to go play somewhere. So fortunately, I did have an opportunity to go to walk on to a school and play at the collegiate level, and that was a lot of fun. That's a whole nother life experience, playing at the D1 level. I credit that as the reason I wanted to go into the military. I just like fell in love with this team atmosphere, and I was like, how can I do this after school, right? Like everyone's talking about what job they're going to get, and I'm like, I kind of want to keep doing that. Like, how can I do
Yeah.
that? And you start talking to some recruiters, and you're like, it kind of sounds like the same thing. Um, Obviously, you get in, and things are a little different. But yeah, I'd say another deviation from plan. So I get this idea in college that I want to go into the military, and I had always had like since I was a early as I can remember like a deep fascination with aviation, love planes, things that fly, go fast, and so I wanted to be a Navy pilot. I was going to be a fighter pilot. That's what I wanted to do. So knowing that I was already in school, it didn't really like the opportunity to go back to the academy or something like that wasn't really on the table for me. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go through school and then I'll apply after the fact for like naval flight school. Well, knowing that it was going to be really challenging, I went and put myself through. Uh, I got my private pilot license, thinking that like, okay, I need to beef up my resume because I'm going to go in front of this flight board, and why are they going to pick some kid off the street to go fly a plane? So the idea is that you can prove to them that you're not going to flunk out of primary school. So I got my pilot's license. I took the test and stuff. Like essentially had a way forward to get in front of the board and get accepted. I won't say like I had a slot in flight school, but basically the last step in the process, like everything was good to go except for my flight medical. And we kind of pushed that off to the very end because I already had a pilot's license. I actually had a Coast Guard license, like a captain's license at the time. I had a summer job where I used to go teach kids how to sail, and so I had gotten that through a summer job that I had. And so anyway, I go to MEPS not really like this is the last box to check. I'm gonna go be a pilot. This is awesome. Well, I go to MEPS and I'll never forget. Everything's going good, and then I go to do my vision test, and they open up that color vision binder, like, hey, read the numbers in here, and I'm like, this is a trick. There's no numbers in there. I don't see any numbers. And the guy's like looking at me like, yeah, you can't see that number there? And then I'm like, this is a trick question. There's no numbers there. Well,
Yeah.
it turns out I had a slight deficiency in my green vision that was going to keep me from going to fly. So ultimately, really scrapped me going into aviation, which was a huge heartbreaker because if you don't know, like getting your pilot's license is not the easiest thing to do, nor the cheapest thing to do. And so I had a lot of time and money invested into this, and that was my path. That was what I was going to do. And I had to really take a step back and take some self-reflection and be like, okay, like I'm choosing to go into the military not to fly, but because I want to serve. And so I had to like reframe my mindset. And so that's, looked at some of the other branches, and, the Army seemed like a great fit for me. So that
Yeah,
is, yeah, two pretty tough examples that I went through early on.
yeah, and that's, at a young age too, that's like those are the types of experiences that really kind of like impact and shape you. I want to talk about your military background in just a second, but before we get into that, what did that was like a major disappointment for you? I mean, you had, like you said, you had invested so much, and this was like the plan. And like, I'm curious about the disappointment part of it. Like, what did it teach you? What did you get out of that you feel like, like facilitated something later on that came into play and to be helpful later?
Yeah, so I want to live in the misery just a little bit. So I think, one of the toughest parts I think about it was like I had been really fortunate. I had a lot of people kind of rally around me that either was currently in service or had just gotten out of service, and a lot of people helped me along the way. And so there was a lot of support. A lot of people put a lot of effort in to help me get to that position, and it was like embarrassing, right? Like I felt like I had sort of not betrayed people, but just like everyone had put all this effort and stuff into getting me into this position, and it was never in the cards to begin with, right? So it was, I don't know, yeah, super embarrassing. It was like tough to go back to, whether it was like a retired colonel or whatever that had, vouched for me or something, and I had to tell them like, hey, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And yeah, I will say like what I learned the most probably out of that situation that I've really carried with me from there forward was like learning to worry about what you can control, right? So
Yeah.
what got taken away from me there was out of my control. There's nothing I could do about it. And so there was, after you sit down and you lick your wounds for a bit, it was like, okay, wasting energy on worrying about stuff you can't control doesn't help you or anyone else around you. Like, let's focus on what you can control. What can I do? And I got to move forward from here. And so, taking that life lesson, I wish I had learned that probably a little earlier on in life, but that one was where I think I really started to grasp the concept of like, let's stop worrying about all this stuff, all this noise that I can't do anything about, and really start focusing on like, all right, how do I move forward? How do we win?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like, it's like you're gonna have your losses, you're gonna get your ass kicked every now and then, you're gonna fall flat on your face, but you always stand back up with something in your hands, in your grasp, right? Like it's always
Right,
something you can pivot with, you can leverage, you can take with you, and a lot of people just don't see it. Like they just don't, um, for a lot of reasons. Like there's a lot of reasons why, but I think that the people who I look up to, and you included, right? Like you didn't do that, right? You're saying, okay, well, I'm gonna do the best I can with what I've got, and I'm gonna move forward and make something positive out of this. And um,
yeah.
it's not always easy to do, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, you struck a chord there. That was probably one of my biggest pet peeves, man. And I mean, even to this day, is someone complaining about a problem or a current situation, and they're not doing anything about it. I'm like, okay, that sucks, but like, what are you doing about it? What can you control? Instead of just, because I don't know why some people just love to bathe in it and just sit there and whine, and they don't want to make any changes. And I'm like, well, I can't really feel bad for you then. Like if this is,
Yeah,
you don't want to make any changes, or like, what are you going to do about it? So
yeah, I know.
yeah,
I'm 100% with you. One of the most annoying and frustrating things for me all the way through my whole life and to this day is people um who complain, who point fingers, who blame something outside of them for their circumstances. In
right,
fact, I one of my five personal values is directly based on that, and it's own your own life, and another way is to say that is like own your shit, right?
right, yeah,
And and I chose that as one of my, I mean, most deepest seated values for that reason, right? Like I don't want to be that person, and I don't really want to be around other people like that either, you know?
yeah, yeah. I love that. That's a really great one.
Yeah.
It's humbling at times.
Yeah. Oh, well, the truth is, like when I think about how I created my values for myself, most of them were based on when I disgusted myself with my own behavior, right? I assumed that something, and it's this thing I just like, oh, I'm just like so mad at myself for X, Y, and Z, and then I said, well, I was like, well, this must be a value that I hold. So I'm going to try and, clearly identify the opposite of that so that I can now walk in line and not have to disgust myself all the time with this
Right.
behavior, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Uh,
it.
yeah. So let's jump into your military career a little bit. So I know kind of a little bit how this story went, but you didn't get to be a Navy pilot, and so you pivoted, and what happened?
Yeah. I don't know how much detail you want. I took a step back. The Navy really, they won't take anyone with any sort of color vision deficiency. The only one that they'll take is the only, and I should back up. I had, for better for worse, if I knew what I knew now, maybe I'd do it differently. But I had it in my brain. I wanted to go commission as an officer. I was going to use my degree. That's what I was going to do. So people listening to this podcast can, pick at that or whatever. But that's what I wanted to go do. And the Navy, the only one you can do is MI. And it is, I think, super duper hard to come off the street and go into MI in the Navy. Like, I remember it was like me and one other guy that were jockeying for whatever the one available position that was up that year. And this dude spoke like four different languages, including Russian, and like had a master's degree from Harvard. He didn't get it. So I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to get it right.
Yeah. Well, you never know. And
uh,
just for the audience, I want to MI is military intelligence, just for people
right, right.
who don't
So
know.
yeah, analyzing all things intel. Um, but anyway, so I knew at that point I was like, all right, I'm in the wrong branch. I need to start looking elsewhere. And I had a really great mentor at the time that was helping me through this. He's a retired Air Force pilot. He's done a lot of really cool stuff. Um, Spent 26 years in the Air Force, flew all different types of fighters, but he was the one kind of really helping me through a lot of this process. And when this is one of the guys I had to come back and talk to, and be like, man, it's not going to happen. And he was like, well, being a fighter pilot is like one of the coolest things you can do. He was like, so the next you need to go find something else that is really cool. Like, and you got to go do that, right? You can't switch to something not cool. So I was like, okay. So I started looking at, I was thinking combat arms stuff, and so and my first one was the Marine Corps, and the second one was the Army. I think, at first, I'm trying to think back. At first, I really wanted to do the Marine Corps just because of their history, their legacy. I really was attracted to that culture that you are aware of. And if I'm being really honest, the Marine Corps said that the next date that they could send me out was like 9 months from now, and the Army said we can take you next month. And so I was like, I gotta go now. It was like this effort to like, I just had this big failure. I need to like do something with my life. And
Yeah.
so I don't care where I'm running, but I'm running fast. And the Army was going to give me the opportunity to do that. And there was an opportunity to do something cool, right? My recruiter was very, honest. He was like, you can have as mellow of a career as you want, or you can go do the cool guy stuff and jump out of planes and all that. And so I was like, great, I love that flexibility. I want to go be a Green Beret, right? And he was like, well, there's a few steps in there, but he was like, that is a route you can take. So yeah, we got all my paperwork together, submitted, and yeah, jumped into they call it an '09 Sierra, but basically you enlist as an E4. You go to basic training. Um, at the time we were at Fort Benning. I don't know if they still do it there, but you go to your basic training. We were on Sand Hill. You finish your basic training, and then you just get bussed across post over to OCS, or Officer Candidate School, where you will then do. It's almost like a basic training 2.0, but it's where you will learn to become an officer, and at which point you commission at the end of that. What you're not guaranteed in the Army, going the active duty side, is what job you're going to do. So
Yep.
you're going in like, I'm just blanket. I'm going to commission as an officer so long as I graduate. And then your job is dependent on how well you do in OCS. So there's a order of merit list. So basically, how you stack up in your class it really dictates what you do there.
Yeah, I
So
remember. I used to be the so in the National Guard side of things, I was the NCOIC of OCS here in the state, and I always remember that branching, that time where people got their branches being kind of a heartbreaking experience
oh man,
for a bunch of
there's
people.
yeah, either cheers of joy or I saw people cry. Like someone that was terrified to be an infantry officer just bawling.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's what if you didn't do very well in the school, or you didn't figure out the games, you were going to go needs to the Army. And so that was pretty scary for a lot of people. I guess I guess I was scared that I wasn't going to get to go do something cool. Fortunately, I had made some great friends, both in basic. There was a lot of us that went from basic to OCS that banded together. We figured it out, and had some good mentors, good NCOs that taught us well. And I did well in school, and I got my first choice. So my first choice was an engineer officer.
yeah.
So commissioned like in, was it April of 2018? Yeah.
So yeah, so like when I think about, well, a couple things, right? Like when I think about people's military service, one, like going through the process of serving, I don't care what anyone did. I mean, there's all these different types of jobs in the military and all these different branches, but it's a similar experience for almost everybody. And then what I've found now, because most of my friends are out or have been out for a while, I'm one of the last few kind of hanging on to their career. But um, it's like the what happens during someone's military career, um, and how they perceive themselves during that career really dictates to for like what happens next, right? Like, I think about you, and you probably know many of these stories just like I do, because anyone who's served knows these people. They get out, they can't, they just cannot reintegrate back into civilian life, or they have all these problems, structurally or culturally and all these other things, or the opposite, the thing that I think probably the story that a lot of people hear is like, oh, this person leveraged their military career and was like super successful. They took what they learned and they made it work on the civilian side. And there's some people in between there, like in the middle, right? But you know, well, I guess first I'm just curious about your perspective on that, right? Like what, your military service, you went through it. You were an Army officer. Um, how did it impact you, and how has it impacted your life since then?
Yeah, I think just to sort of, I guess, capture what you're saying, you see a lot of guys and gals. No, I shouldn't say a lot, but you see some guys and gals that attach like their identity to a rank or a position or something they did, and that's their whole identity versus like your identity is who you are as a person, as a leader. How do you carry those Army values? And like those are very useful things outside of the Army, but like, what is your character like? Um, how are you when things are really hard, and how well do you work with others? Like those are the type of characteristics that you see someone leverage their military career and go out and do great things. It can be tough, right? The the culture in there wants you to believe how important your rank is or what's on your sleeve and things like that. So you do have to, constantly remind yourself that the most important thing is like how you're treating others and how you handle difficult situations. So yeah, I never, it's kind of funny. I always tried to, I showed up with a pretty laid back personality, and a lot of that got beat out of me. But I tried to hang on to some of the more relaxed mantra. But like a funny story, I was in OCS, um, and you get tapped for leadership positions, and so we show up, and there's about 160 of us, and it's a mixture, just for everyone. It's a mixture of like guys and gals like myself that came off the street, and then you also have non-commissioned officers that are making the switch from NCO over to the officer side. And so we had, you know, a lot of experience from, like Green Berets and Rangers and all that stuff coming in from their past military experience coming in, and you're all kind of one group at that point, and there's no rank. Um, and anyway, we show up, and day one, day zero, I get tapped to be the like in charge of everyone. Uh, I was the battalion commander or whatever, the position in the schoolhouse, and I'm sitting up there, and I'm like this scrawny, like 20 something year old kid standing in front of like some like pretty like hardened like warriors out there, and I'm gonna tell them what to do. I have no, like, I am 12 weeks old in the Army. Like, I don't even know the right words yet. I know nothing. And everyone's looking at you to like make those decisions. And I'll never forget, I like made my first, like, I dressed the battalion, and uh, someone came up to me afterwards and it was like, "Hey, so you're from California, right?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm from North Carolina." And they're like, "Oh, we just figured you were like a surfer bro. Like you're just wildly laid back, right?" So um, I got pegged as like super laid back, and I learned to sort of tone that back. But yeah, I had always like kind of throughout my career try not to get too wrapped around the axles of title or position, and even to now, like being out in my current role, like I there's try to like don't even worry about what your title or position is. Like, what are you bringing to the table? What do you have to offer? What value are you to this company, to this organization, community? Um, so yeah, it's certainly one of the biggest things I've tried to take with me.
I think that's such a huge aspect of it too, and I can't agree more about how people get so attached to one way of being, you know, and like you use the word identity, right? Like they just get so they throw all of themselves into that role, that position, that rank, that identity, and they just can almost never come off of it, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and which is why, and I've been that way, you know, so I understand it. But I think one of the things that that's really tried to help me is what I try to attach myself to is something like way bigger than anything. You know, I talk about purpose a lot. I talk about values a lot because I've learned through my own experience that when I can stay focused on those things, then it's easy for me to, and assuming those things are good things, you know, like, and people can have like the wrong purpose or the wrong values,
right.
um, but that helps me to just pivot, change, adapt, be flexible, roll with the punches, step up when I need to, step back when I need to, and then never get too attached to any one way of being.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess that brings me to one of the, you know, something to ask you, like, how do you think about purpose or values or like any of that? You mentioned Army values a little bit ago in the discussion, but like, do you, do you have like an operating, you know, do you have something that you operate from as like a core, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I know I don't want to jump like ahead of myself too much. I know we're kind of like going through a timeline here, but I was raised in a Christian household, went to church, um, kind of got a little distant in my faith in college and even in the military a little bit. Um, Whenever I had my son 3 years ago, well, I guess we'll back up probably about 6 months from that. But um, my wife now and I, we both like looked at each other like we were very young in our relationship, and there was a lot of moving parts going on. Like I was getting out of the military, she was still in. There was a lot of unknowns, right? A lot of turmoil, and we both looked at each other. We're like, we have got to find something hard to grab onto. And for us, that was faith, right? Like becoming more strong in our Christian faith. And so that has been a really, I mean, a strong point of emphasis that we've made in our life. Like that was like we looked at each other and we'd kind of been living this sort of crazy Wild West lifestyle, and we're like, we're about to be parents, arguably the most important thing we're going to do in our life. And we have got to provide like a strong foundation for our kid to be centered around. And so that became like one of our, really important thing for me. Obviously, a little bit later on in life now, and certainly now, right? But that was big for us, man. Is getting strong in our faith.
Yeah, I think that's huge because it's like it goes right along with what I was talking about, right? Like what faith does for a lot of people is helps with the structure of values, purpose, things like that. It's kind of
Yeah,
written into which is why I have to believe that, like, that's why God had, has, you kind of knew the system and knew what human beings
yeah,
need. So yeah, it's always, I always try to, we'll jump back into some other things, but I always try to, whenever I can, is just talk to people about purpose and values because, I found that you can kind of like figure out how people are going to end up in their life if they have some clear, they're able to identify those and kind of speak about them easily and clearly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So going back to you were in OCS, you got through that whole process, and then you ended up, what happened after OCS for you?
Yeah. Commissioned engineer officer. I chose that one because, coming into it, like I said, I wanted to be a Green Beret. It's like all we wanted to do. All my buddies and I could talk about, right? We saw someone with a freaking long tab. They were a god, right? Like that was the coolest thing, on the planet. And at the time, like coming in, I think infantry was probably, that's probably the most linear way to get there. And then I had a couple of drill sergeants put a bug in my ear, and they're like, like you can kind of do the same thing as an engineer, and there's a lot more like diversity in like what you could do. You could be, if you're marketing yourself to that community, you might be able to bring more to the table if you're not just another infantry guy. And so that was my thought process behind going down that route. But anyway, I commissioned. You go to BOLIC, or your engineer basic officer leadership course. That was out in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So it's kind of like right dead center in the state. Spent about 6 months out there. You kind of just touch the top of the waves on all things engineering. And then my first duty station was out in Fort Bliss, Texas. So I got assigned
where I'm at right now.
That's right. That's right. Out there in the desert, America's Tank Division. So I went to 11AD out there, which at the time they were a striker unit. And then while I was there, it transitioned. They're not heavy unit now; they're armored now. But I thinking about like things that don't go your way. That was not where I wanted to go. Like when
Yeah.
you're jockeying for where you want to go, like you want to go airborne, that's where you're going to go to a lot of the schools and have opportunities. And so whenever I remember my branch manager like sent me a list of duty stations of where, I wanted to go. And she's like, give me your top five. And I gave her my top five. Fort Bliss was not in my top five. And so I was like, why did you even ask me? Like, I don't,
Yeah.
it's an armyism, but it's another one of those things. It's like, okay, I didn't have any control over this, but there's no sense in whining and complaining about I'm going to this duty station. I need to make the most of it, right? Like, how can I spin this to be a great opportunity? So yeah, get to Fort Bliss. I think I might had I don't know, a month before I jumped into my platoon leader time, or your PL time. At the time, they had just gotten back from a train up to go to Afghanistan as a striker unit. And then I don't remember if it was while they were at their train up or on the way back. I think they were on the buses on the way back or something, that they found out that we were going to transition from a striker unit to an armored unit. So the deployment got scrapped. And this is, of course, like, this kind of near the drawdown, so they're starting to pull guys back anyway, which was another blow. Not that like you wish to go to war, but you'd like to go do your job. And so it was not like I get to this unit I didn't want to be at, and then our deployment also got scrapped, and I was like, God, man, like can't freaking win.
Yeah.
And we did have a cool opportunity, so I jumped into my PL time, and that was kind of right when the border mission came down, and they were going to want us to go support border construction anywhere along the southern border. And we got sent a couple of different places, but ultimately ended up in Southern California, which is not palm trees and blue water. It is mountains, cold, and you wouldn't have thought you were in California. But anyway, that was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I was going to get to actually do something that that mattered and was like a real world thing, and it was going to have real world consequences. Like in terms of like what was in the news at the time, like we were doing the most important thing that was on headlines at the time. So that was a cool blessing in disguise. And you know, it was, you were sent out to this sort of operating area. There was no rule book or directions how. It was like, hey, we need you to do X and figure it out. And that was a great opportunity to like put your head together with some experienced NCOs and problem solve. And it was a constantly like, we got to do better tomorrow. We got to do better tomorrow. Like, this is what we did today. It's not good enough. We need to be better tomorrow. And getting to work through that uh, taught me a lot, right? Like, I was a very green officer coming into this thing, and had my fair share of mishaps and things gone wrong, and learning what a property book is while you're out there.
Oh
Like,
no.
you know, it's like
How'd you learn that one? Let me guess how you learned about your property book.
we might have misplaced some tent parts or something, but
Yeah.
they were
Well,
found.
yeah, something you just said like really triggered something in me where it was like one of the things that I learned through my military experience is, you know, how to be entrepreneurial, how to be creative and innovative in how you get solutions. And like you mentioned, you know, you were told to go do X, go figure it out. You know, that's not something people, a lot of like civilians definitely think about when they think about the military. They think that it's
Yeah,
like someone telling you exactly what to do and then all the sub steps on how to do that. And it's very structured and very rigid. And there are aspects of that. But what I found in my career, especially the jobs I was doing, was like someone just said, there's the there's the destination, there's the end point. Get us there however you get us there, and you
yeah,
know don't fuck it up. You
right.
know, and that kind of something you said, you know, I just kind of like reminded me of that, and I'm curious about what your experience with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I, you know, to just touch on like the army gives you a lot of tools. Like the military gives you a lot of tools in terms of like decision making processes and like how we can go about like assessing how well something went and how we can do it better. They give you a lot of like formats to succeed, but it's up to you to like employ those and ultimately like find the solution or how to get there. You know, there's and you know, some of that comes down to like you got good leaders and you got bad leaders, and the good ones that you know empower their people to do their jobs and to go figure out that problem on their own. And obviously that is super crucial in all, you know, I don't care if you're in the military or out in corporate America, like that is just such a invaluable thing to be able to do. Um, but yeah, you know, like what a crazy freaking concept the army has to like give a 22-year-old kid like tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment and just free range to like go mess it all up, right? And
Yeah,
obviously, there's a lot of guardrails put there to help them along, right? You don't want anyone to get hurt or killed, but you know, it's like nowhere in corporate America is a fresh out of college kid given the left and right limits or the you know that much latitude to go and make a decision and go do stuff like that and being responsible for a bunch of people's lives and families and all that stuff. So it, you know, you sink or swim, you know,
yeah.
in that position, right? You find out what people are made of because you got to make a decision, and if it's the wrong one, you better learn from it, you know.
Yeah, I cannot imagine. I mean, I'm enlisted obviously, but like thinking about myself as like a 21, 22, 23-year old, you know, I had been in the army for, you know, by the time I was getting into leadership positions and really had to be responsible for like equipment and people and everything else, you know, I had, you know, 5, 6 years under my belt. You know, I felt confident and trained and prepared for that, you know, but
Hmm.
and you know, lieutenants are kind of the running joke of the army, no offense,
Right.
but like,
Nope.
but for, yeah, but
For good
for
reason.
good reason, right? Because, but like, what a horrible position to be put in,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Yeah.
So I don't envy that. I don't envy any of that. And, I've always taken it upon myself to like really, mentor those young lieutenants and stuff as an NCO to really kind of help them, set them up for success.
Yeah, obviously you got to have a lot of, good attributes to succeed in that the officer world or whatever. But ultimately, like you just touched on it, like behind every like great LT was an awesome platoon sergeant, right? Like that just
Yeah.
really saw the value in mentoring a young person. I mean, not always young, but someone that doesn't know any better, and letting them fail and guiding them to make a better decision, or whatever the situation is. But
Yeah,
um,
I
yeah,
that's kind of like the you've actually mentioned this has been like a running thread through like our conversation, like even now something that you've hinted at, but something that's majorly important to me and really what this podcast about and everything is meaningful community, human connection,
right.
and and I've just I'm just like super passionate about that, building that, helping other people to find that, build it, lean on it, and contribute to it.
Right.
And I'm kind of
What
curious.
value you add? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on you know uh, relationships, community. You mentioned mentoring. There's a lot of different ways that you could think about it, but I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit here. We can come back, but that was like the army was that for me. You've got that community, and it's awesome, right? Like you're all doing the same thing. It's hard, and there's a lot of. It's easy. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's right there. That community's right there, and so when Kelsey and I got out, we had this new baby. Man, how like we were like immediately like, how do we find a community? Like we need a community. There's a village has got to raise this kid, right? And we weren't anywhere near our family. And so for us, that was like getting heavily involved in a church. And then
Hmm.
obviously, like I'm passionate about like fitness, but it was also like getting involved in a gym, like going and find a gym. And, people ask me like why I like CrossFit or that type of workout, that community style workout. It's for that reason. Like I want to go have a group of people that I can be around, that I get to do something that I'm passionate about with. And, um, it was, I think it's just so paramount in all the aspects of your life, like mental health and being able to succeed and lean on people because you just can't do it alone.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me a little more about that. Like, what is it about community? So you mentioned two specific types of communities that you're involved with through your church and through your gym. Um, what is it about it? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I kind of know, but I'm always curious because at least on the gym side, like I own a gym, right? So I kind
Yeah,
of understand what I'm trying to create on the user experience side. But I'm kind of curious from your part, and whether you on church or gym, however you want to think about it. But what is it about it? Do you think that adds value to your life?
that's a great question. I don't know that I've ever really like formulated a specific answer. You know, I, for me, like community is like having people to lean on when you go through those life failures, or you're just going through something tough and you need help, or if it's like something as simple like I need someone to watch my kid for 30 minutes or something, right? And someone that I trust, right? I think maybe that's a big part of it, like having people you can trust.
Mm,
Um, it would be a big one. But I think having that strong sense of community with people also allows you to really learn from people, like what are their values, and kind of pick what you like and don't like from other people. But um, it really helps you kind of grow as a person. That way you don't get stuck in this like sort of all about me think tank, like this is how I do things, but like you're seeing other people that inspire you to be better, right? Like I love being part of communities that everyone's better than me, right? And whatever it is,
yeah.
whether they're an awesome entrepreneur or they're great at some sort of sport, it inspires you to to be more like them. You know, I want to be more like those awesome people.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. You know, it's one thing that I hadn't really thought much about, you know, because I am always reaching for community. I'm either trying to build it or be a part of one. I mean, that's just like innately a part of who I am, and I don't think
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time thinking about why or that. But you said the word trust, and when you said that, I think that's such a big part of it, right? Like you can't discount that piece. It's like you know, like thinking about people you can actually rely on and that, you know, they can trust you and you can trust them. Just that peace that comes with that. I think even if you never actually do anything for each other, you know, either way, you know, just
Yeah.
knowing that that trust is there um, is huge, you
It's
know?
probably, like, not to get like Joe Rogan-y, but it's probably like pretty primal, right? Like it's got to be a primal need for humans to like, you need to have the pack. Like you need to have
Mm,
like people that you can trust. Like you said, like you may never use it, but I know that I can call on whatever, whoever it is for anything. Like I know if I needed him, I have that security. It gives me the bandwidth to go out and go do more in my life, knowing that like I've got a kind of a safety net, a group of people that like if I fall, they're there. I've got someone to catch me. So it gives me the ability to go out and like, take that next step.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that it's built into us biologically. Well, I know that it is, but like I never really think about that
Yeah,
really, you know,
right.
in my day, you know, in the modern day to day life, you know, um, well, you talked about parenthood, which is something that, that's on my mind. You have a small child and a baby on the way, and I have
Yep.
you know, I've got three kids and a baby on the way, and so I've been thinking a lot. I've been contemplating parenthood a lot lately, and I'm curious and you even mentioned when you talked about when you met Kelsey and you had that conversation, like parenthood might be the most important thing you ever do in your life,
Yeah.
um, and I feel that way. I'm kind of just curious about your thoughts on being a father and a parent and all those things.
Yeah, so I'll back up. I'll go back in our timeline here. So got to do some cool stuff in the army. Got to go to some schools and be a part of some cool missions and stuff like that. And then um, I kind of got into this like sort of fork in the road where if I was going to stay in the military, I wanted to go do something cool, right? Like I
Yeah.
wanted to go wherever it was in the special operations community, right? Like I wanted to go do something. I want to go to the next level, and then my girlfriend and I we got pregnant, and I had this. I had this thought, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a dad, right? And doing some more like self reflection, I thought about who I was as a person, and I cannot give enough credit to like my parents and specifically my father. Not that my mom's any less of a parent, but just thinking about fatherhood and who my father was to me. Like I was blessed with such an awesome father figure, mentor, and I was like, dang, dude, I got to do this. I got to be at least half the man he was, right? So,
Uh-huh.
like knowing how blessed I was in that, like I've got to give it back, right? And not to say that, man, I've got plenty of buddies that they're in the spooky boy world and they're great dads too. For me, personally, like I wanted to be a present father, and I knew going down that rabbit hole, I wasn't going to be able to do that to whatever satisfaction I deemed.
Yeah.
So I made the decision that I wanted to get out of the military to be a more present dad, and yeah, obviously getting out of the military is scary, and that's I guess something else to unpack. But I you know I thought it was the most important. I still do. It's the most important. It's the coolest thing that I've ever done is become a father, and I think it's the most important job that we have as human beings, like being good parents to your kids and giving back to them. So it really sort of like started restructuring my career path. You know, I had this idea of what I was going to do, and God had a different path for me. And so, um, yep, I started kind of getting my crap together to figure out how I was going to get out. And that's scary because no one really knows how to do it. It seems, you know, people get out of the military all the time, and it seems like there's no great plan, right? Like there's there's just like no one really knows how to guide you. There's a lot of programs and stuff, but a lot of it's on you. And yeah, I got fortunate. I got hooked up with some recruiters and stuff that to help find a position that was going to allow me to get out, support my family, and be present, right? And so, um, you know, that was my goal.
Yeah, I think two things that you said about parenthood and being a father are things that like really resonate with me. The one of them being like you didn't say the exact word, but it's you know, sacrifice and compromise. You know, it's you know, not it's putting something bigger than yourself ahead of your own personal needs. You know, and I you know, I just think that that's you know, you can you can sometimes tell like I guess the other word that you use that really resonates with me is being present, right? And I think that maybe those are the most, you know, if you're gonna make the distinction of like a good parent versus you know, a less than good parent, a bad parent is, you know, a parent who puts their own needs above the others and isn't very present. You'd probably characterize that as like not being a good parent. So
Yeah,
um,
and get it, and I don't want to discount, you know, anyone other. It's done it differently. Like I said, I got plenty of buddies that are doing it, but you know, from my personal experience, like a good a good parent to me was present, right? And
yeah,
that was just my experience, and so you know, I know what I know, and I know that
yeah.
that works, you know, and
Well,
so
well,
I
I'm
wanted
the
to repeat
perfect
it.
Yeah, I'm the perfect example, honestly. I have two older kids, adult kids, right? And when they were born, I was running and gunning. I was living that hardcore military lifestyle. I was all about me and what I was trying to do with my career. And I can honestly say, and both of my kids would agree that my relationship with them was deeply impacted. It and still is. I mean, to this day not nearly as close with them as I would love to be. And I know what you're saying about like, yes, there are some parents out there who are, you know, they're gone a lot, but they make it work. But the question and I'm not knocking them at all. I mean, like, there's
Right,
like you said, there's like, everyone gets to prioritize what matters to them. And I
right.
respect and honor that. Um, but it definitely is going to impact relationship. That distance is going to impact relationships. And so like the contrast to that is like, you know, most of the time I'm just kind of like a normal guy back home running a business. And with my 9-year-old daughter, I've been around her whole life, you know, and the relationship is just completely different. And so I think um you know, present, that word present is just like really ringing out for me, not just physically,
Yeah.
but
Oh
but
yeah. I mean, the worst
in
thing I could have done, right, is like not chase that dream, decide to get out, and then, you know, you're on your phone the whole time you're home from work or whatever with your kid.
yeah,
You're there, but you're not there,
yeah.
right? And so that, I mean, I mean, you talk about like parenting techniques and stuff, but you know, like that was something Kelsey and I talked a lot about with like how we're gonna act around our kids. And I don't care what the status quo is out, you know, you see other different parenting styles. Like we're gonna be present. Most important thing for us is like face to face, and yeah, you're
What
absolutely right.
What are some of the other things that you and Kelsey talked about the types of parents that you wanted to be, present being one, but are there some other agreements that you kind of have made as a couple?
You know, like obviously like being good role models to our kid. Like obviously you know, but like kids freaking they they pick up on everything, right? Like they
Yeah.
are so observant. Like it's crazy. Like you think that they're not paying attention, but they are. They're just picking up on it, like your body language and how you react to like frustrating situations. Um, and so reminding that like, dude, they're always observing you. So like, really start to you kind of have your own come to Jesus moment, or like, dude, how am I conducting myself personally, just in general? Like, what's my language like? How am I talking? You know, like, how do
Yeah.
I talk to other people? How do I treat other people? Um, and so, I had always, I would think that like I'm a decent human being up and, have been, but you really start to really self-analyze. You're like, well, how good am I? Right? Like, how am I really? Like, what's my language like during the day? How do I treat people? So, some of that stuff. Obviously, we wanted to like it's been important that we raise Cam with Christian morals, and he's grown up in a house um, where we know God, and that one's certainly been a big one for us.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like I'm gonna do a plug for Steve Ranella right now, but I recently read a book that he wrote. It's called Outside Kids in an Inside World. And the whole book's based on the premise of like how to get your family involved in the outdoors and the importance of that, like being involved with like nature, how it's like it's an important relationship that you need to have. And so that's been another one for us is like getting Cam outside and we're doing fun stuff, out in the woods and things like that. So that's obviously that's a personal thing, but something that we find really important is to have that relationship outside.
Yeah. I mean, like hearing you talk about all those things, I would say that like it's a great guide. Many of the you mentioned probably 5 to 8 different kind of like principles of parenting, and part of parenting is like you said is like it's not so much what you're saying to your kids or like or what you're like trying to get them to do. It's like how you are being in ways
Yeah.
that rub off on them in
Hmm.
being good human beings. And
Yeah.
it's just it's heavy, being it's difficult to be a parent, and I see people, and really thinking about like Kelsey's a great example. You and Kelsey are both great example. Like when I see like I see people like being parents, and I'm like, man, like I wish I could be like that. I want to so it's like as parents we're teaching and learning from each other also, like
Oh yeah.
how to be for your kids.
Yeah.
So
No, that's well, and you want to go back to like the importance of community. That I think that's a huge one, right? Like the saying like it takes a village to raise a kid, but it's really about like as parents, like we're all doing this like self check, like how am I doing? Am I like they're doing something pretty cool in raising their kid. I want some of that, right?
yeah.
And so finding that community that breeds that positive, influence on kids. Um,
Yeah, and supports each other through the hard times. I get, yeah, exactly. Talking about community, right? Like the parenting community where it's like you can go vent to somebody when you're having a hard time as a parent, or you
yeah,
can ask for some advice, or you can, like you mentioned, let me watch your kid for 30 minutes while you go take a breather. That give and take of like the parent network is
yeah.
huge.
Well, I know, like I've come to you and I've been like, dude, my kid is insane. Like he is so rough on other kids. Like he like is causing physical harm to people. I was like, do you know how like anything about this? And you're like, oh yeah, like been there, man. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Like there's
Yep.
just a lot of energy there.
We
Yeah.
used to get met. Well, I told you, and I'll say it here, but like my every single day, we'd pick up Harlow from daycare when she was a kid. She beat up another kid. She can't keep her hands to herself. She's just rough, And so,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But if you didn't have someone to bounce that off with, or either just share your worry about that, or to someone who's just a couple years ahead of you to share that experience, you wouldn't know what to do. You know?
Yeah, like in something like that, man, like you gotta have trust that like I'm not worried about you're not gonna like think any differently that my kid's acting like an asshole, right? Like
Right.
like I know I could come to, a number of people, but you included that like you're not gonna judge me, you're not gonna think any like poorly as like me as a parent or whatever. Like I just need to bounce this off of you, man. Like what? how have you handled this in the past, and what was your experience like, good, bad, or
Yeah.
indifferent, you know? So super,
Yeah.
super important.
I feel like one of the fundamental, like, self-actualization is like another part of, like, it's a three-part purpose. For me, self-actualization is the important part. And part of being self-actualized, in my opinion, is the ability to be fully expressed without the fear of judgment from others, right? And like what you just mentioned is really important, right? Can I go to this other person and share something that's kind of like, I'm not super, there's a lot of different things that you might share with somebody and feel like you can express that without the worry and fear that you're going to be judged or by yourself.
Right.
Most of the time we judge ourselves more than other people judge us, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so I really think that's super important. Um, well, there's always a couple things that I always try to ask people about on the show, and I want to ask you about it. You've talked about all these different aspects of, like, you were an athlete, a collegiate athlete, you're a tactical athlete by being in the military, you're a father, and you're actually. And one of the things that we didn't get around to, maybe we'll get you on another episode, was I wanted to talk to you about running the family business. You're a business owner, or I guess, are you considered an owner in your business, or do you have a role within the family
My
business?
last name's on the building. My
Yeah.
no, I mean, and my dad still, hasn't passed over yet, I guess legally, but
Mm,
I'm drinking through a fire hose and trying to learn as much as possible about running a business and all the different intricacies to this industry and things like that. So I'm not technically an owner yet. I'm in training, if you will.
yeah.
I'm in
Okay.
my
Well,
lieutenant phase.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe I'll get you on a part two of it. I love, like, being an entrepreneur and a business owner.
Yeah.
I just get, like, jacked up about that kind of stuff. We probably don't have enough time for it on this episode, but the reason why I brought it up is because when I say to a lot of people that one of my parts of my purpose is optimal health, a lot of people jump to um, elite physical fitness, like doing, like, amazing feats of performance and all that stuff. But that's really not what I'm talking about when I think about optimal health. And so, but I want to know what you think of when you think about being a dad, a business, being in business, maybe being in the military, or any of those things. What do you think of when I say optimal health?
Yeah, I would say like it's like all aspects, right? Like how healthy are you in all aspects of your life? Like how's your personal mental health? Like how's the health of your household, right? Like is it a positive, like loving place that encourages growth? How's the health of your business? Like that one can be pretty easy if you're looking at the books. It can also be like going out on the shop floor and like what's the morale like out there? Like do people love to work here? And it's like kind of one of my things that I'm sure you try to embody this too. But like I want to create somewhere that like I want to win for sure, right? But I want to create a place where people like want to work, right? They're
Yeah.
like really proud to work at our company. Like our company turned 100 years old this year, and
Wow.
like that's something we're really proud of. And it would not exist had like there not been some good leadership over the years to create like foster a place where people want to like come and work here. Like we've had people retire at like 40 years, and so.
That's
Um,
amazing.
I think it's got to be a little bit of everything. Obviously, you and I, like health, physical, and that one's probably easy to talk about, but you know, I, I think it does really affect a lot of the other areas of your life. Like if you're not physically healthy, it's hard to have that energy to come into work and win during the day and go out and get that new business and be a positive influence around the company and then go home and still have the energy to play with your insane 3-year-old and like spend that time with them, not just want to lay down and then spend some time with your significant other and then go do stuff on the weekends, I get outside. So like, being, physically fit, obviously I was an athlete. I love to compete, but, I do think it does play a big role in being able to have that energy in other aspects of your life.
Yeah, you and I think, are very aligned on that. I think that, like, your your health, and we think health as a broad sense is like the foundation for everything else you're going to do in life. And so it has to be there. And then when I think about optimal health, it means also that like no aspect of that broad sense of health can be too overly emphasized, right? Because if I'm going to say hell yes to this, like I'm going to go hard on this, I'm also saying hell no to
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bunch of
It's a
other
great
things.
point.
And
Yeah.
so when I think about optimization, it's like what are the things that matter most to me? How can I prioritize those things that really matter to me? And how can I create a foundation of like holistic, kind of broader health
Yeah.
to do those things or that thing,
Yeah, the way it was described to me is like you've got these big rocks, right? These big rocks in your life, and those are like the really important pillars in your life, whether that's family, business, your physical health. And then you got a bunch all these other small rocks that are like maybe they're fun things to do or going golfing with your friends or whatever it might be, all this other stuff. And the problem is like you can imagine you have this jar and you can fill up the jar with all the small rocks and then you go to try to put those bigger rocks in afterwards and they don't freaking fit, right? Because you can't
yeah.
move stuff out of the way. But if you put the big rocks in first, then you can fill up around with the small rocks later. So yeah, I mean, making sure you got your priorities straight is
Yeah.
something and you're constantly reassessing, but you gotta re reevaluate all the time.
Yeah, what matters kind of can change from moment to moment, right? Like
Yeah.
and change quickly. Like you said, you found out you were going to be a dad kind of. I think hopefully I'm not letting this. I think it was a surprise when you guys found
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so your whole life changes in that. Like what you thought was important 3 seconds before that news changed dramatically after that news, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want like my son's gonna watch this one day, I'm sure, and I don't want him to hear like, "Oh, you ruined Dad's plan," right?
Oh no, no,
It
yeah,
was like, being a dad is absolutely like the coolest thing that I've ever done and such a blessing. And it was just that was God's plan for me. That was what was gonna happen, right? But you're absolutely right, man. Like I was living a very selfish life up until that point. I know I was, and I was
yeah.
having a lot of fun doing it. And I think God intervened and was like, "Hey, man, there's more important things than you in this world." And
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say, right? Like, not at all did you did this child like ruin your plans or ruin your life? They brought to clarity to what actually mattered and what was the most
yeah,
important thing and the most joyful thing and the most like impactful thing you're ever gonna do in your life. You just were kind of misled prior to that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you're 100% right. And obviously, I know you
yeah,
get to talk about it much, but yeah, obviously, I've got blessed with a really awesome life partner, my wife, Kelsey. Met her in
yeah.
the military, and that was a real blessing that she understands a lot of the stuff. But man, what an awesome mother, and just have to give a shout out to her.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to talk about that a lot because that's something that's like, I had someone tell me recently, and I can't let it go now. And as someone who's, again, admittedly, I like to be as vulnerable and honest as possible. I've been divorced twice, and you think you found the right person, and then things happen or whatever, and again, it's an education I couldn't have learned. I couldn't have read this in a book. I couldn't have learned it any other way. But a friend of mine recently said something to me, and I just can't let it go right now. And I think you and Kelsey are maybe a great, or at least as I stand right now, I think about you guys. A good example of this is that you're choosing your life partner, choosing whom you're going to be, married to or stay with for the rest of your life. Um, Probably is the number one choice you're ever going to make in your life. And choosing the correct partner is going to facilitate every other bit of success that you're going to have in your life. So I would love to take some time on this show to kind of talk about like that decision in your life and like how you thought about choosing a partner and what that's meant for you since then.
Yeah, so this is just me being as candid as possible, right? So uh, I was young and energetic, excited world at my fingertips, lieutenant, and you know, got to know her. Basically, the backstory is my like roommate, also another a lieutenant that I was working with in this unit, had heard about. Um, Basically, we had just gotten a new female lieutenant into our unit, and she's a military intelligence officer, and his job at the time, I think he was a platoon leader or an XO, I can't remember, but anyway, he was going to go do some joint training with this gal and her unit with the FBI. They were going to go do some like joint training, FBI engineers and intel. Well, he goes to like they go meet up the local FBI field office, and he guy gets to know her a little bit, and he comes home from work that day. He's like, dude, we have this really cool gal that's like in our unit. Like, we got to invite her to hang out, right? So we invited her to hang out, and I think the first time I met her, we were floating down the Rio Grande on some inner tubes. So
It's a good way
that's
to
how we
meet.
met,
Yeah.
right? Started hanging out, and you know, one thing led to another. We ended up pregnant probably about 6 months later. So parents haven't met her yet. We're obviously pretty new in our relationship, and we had these careers that were going on, and things got serious real quick. You know, we sat down, and I think the first conversation we like serious conversation that we had about this was like, okay, this is happening. Um, what we can control, like we don't know each other very well, right? Like we're 6 months old in this relationship, like we don't know each other very well, but what we can control is being good parents,
Yeah.
right? And that was like, you know, I know there's some different philosophies out there, but like that was our goal at that time. It was like, hey, let's focus on being the best parents we can be, and whatever that looks like, that's like getting back in church, that's, you know, finding a good community. Um, but we can work on us later because we, you know, for us, the most important thing was being there for Cam. So um, I I don't want to say I won the lottery, like you know, like she's just an incredible human being, right? Because you
Yeah.
know, like this happened, and she was like down, like she's ready to like be an awesome parent. I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. And so it just worked out that we're also best friends, and we love to do stuff together. And a lot of our, you know, we didn't probably didn't share a lot of the same hobbies when we first met, but we do now, you know. And
Yeah.
it was just like an eagerness to learn more about one another. And she's an inspiration for me. She's got a great compassion for people, um, whereas I'm probably a little more black and white than most. But we're a great balance.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, sometimes you just get lucky. But you're absolutely right. Like, because for us, it was that was an important thing that like we're gonna be parents first, and we'll choose each other later, right? Like we will choose each to be with one another later. We're not gonna be together as a result of something else. Because Kelsey had just gone through a divorce herself, and she did that. Like she got married because of other things going on in life, and it was made sense. And so for us, it was really important that we were intentional about our relationship. So we, you know, we didn't get married for 2 years after, you know, Cam. It
Yeah.
was like we wanted to have a very intentional growth in our relationship, and we've made this decision and this promise before God, and we've really spent some time on it. So you're right, man. Yeah, choosing your life partner is, poof, not an easy task, but it's a damn important one.
Yeah, you know, hearing you like tell your story has like kind of because you were talking about you know like, earlier in your life you wanted to be a part of like a team, right? And then you got into the military because you wanted to continue that team. And what do great teams have? They have like a mission. They have a goal. They join together for something bigger than themselves. And I think it's just beautiful how it all tied together for you in terms of your marriage, right? Like you came together not because you found each other. I mean, like it wasn't about like the physical attraction. It wasn't
Yeah,
about the your jobs or your status or anything else. It's like you guys said, no, we're going to come together because we want to be great parents, and here's our
yeah,
mission, and here's our goal, and then we'll figure everything else, the periphery, out. But
yeah,
I just think it kind of all came together so beautifully for you in your life and all these lessons that you've learned over time.
yeah. No, yeah, it is. You're hitting the nail on the head there. Absolutely. It it was great for us to have that mission, to have, being parents. Um, and that's what we, surrounded it around. So
Yeah, and you're just
pretty
getting
cool.
started, right? Like you got a 3-year-old, and you've got another one on the way, and there's
We
just
do.
yeah, there's so
We
much
got a baby
excitement.
girl. She'll be here. I'll be a girl dad in uh, about a month. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I think being a girl dad, I have 2 daughters, and just there's something different. You say there's mama's boys and daddy's girls, and that's like I think a cliche saying for a reason because there's just like a special connection
yeah,
with those types of relationships, and
absolutely.
what and a lot of responsibility. I told Harlow the other day, it was like I think my job in life right now is to be the model and the example of someone who you should pick to marry later on in life. And so I take that with a lot of seriousness. Like, am I acting in a way? Am I representing for her someone who I would want her to marry? And of course, I jack this up all the time, right? Like, I make so many mistakes, but that's what brings me back to the effort of like trying to be a good example.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. Wh- I heard this Carlson. He's talking about picking your life partner, and he made a comment that find a gal that has a great relationship with her father.
Yeah.
And like he unpacks it a little bit, but I want to know your thoughts on that because I thought like, I never thought about that. But man, you start to really think about it, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much there. I mean, obviously, we've all heard someone with daddy's issues, and you've heard that saying thrown around. So that's one part of it, right? But the other part of it is yeah, if this gal has a strong relationship with her father, she probably understands a lot of what she's going to have compassion and understanding for your part as being a man and a partner because she's had that person to kind of bounce these ideas off of
Yeah.
and share with. So, I mean, that's my thought on it, but it does make. I mean, I guess what about you? How did it hit you when you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's a lot of different philosophies on how the household should be managed or whatever, but I think there's a great relationship with your father. You see someone that is I don't know, the head of the household. I think that's important. Like there's roles you got to have in the household, and be able to have that relationship between a daughter and a father, I think is it teaches a lot about like respect, the mutual respect that you have for each other. Um, yeah, I know, it's kind of, I was curious because you've heard the surface level stuff like daddy issues or whatever, but it does make a lot of sense that a girl with a great relationship with her father, they have a better relationship with males in general,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Um, is sort of like kind of what it comes down to, maybe.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think it creates an opportunity for you too. Like as I was thinking about it, is like if she has a great relationship with her father, then that means that you were kind of brought into that relationship, and that also gives you. So thinking about like the officer NCO relationship, right? Like it's kind of like you have that senior enlisted advisor to like help you.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if there's a challenge or if you're having a hard time communicating or anything, you've got that support that you've kind of been brought into that's going to help you to be a better partner for her also.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
you know. So,
Good stuff.
well, yeah, man, I think, bringing this, is it, before we close the whole thing, was there anything that you like wanted, like, was there anything you was hoping I was going to ask you about or anything that you wanted to talk about coming onto the show?
No, I think I would certainly like to revisit being an entrepreneur or small business owner at some point, that would be really fun to. I'd love to hear some of your, thoughts and ideas and success and failures,
Yeah.
because I know they could certainly help me out. But no, Ethan, I'm just like real. I mean, I feel really honored. Obviously, like I look up to you in a lot of aspects of life, and I felt really honored for you to ask me to be on here. So I always love getting to chat with you, man, and
Yeah.
hope you're staying cool out there in that El Paso desert.
Yeah, well, same to you. Like again, I would never ask anybody to be on the show that I didn't look up to, that I didn't respect, that I didn't think had something to offer the world, that had a gift that they can share with the world. And I appreciate just that I know you, and I appreciate for how you show up in this world. And yeah, it's just awesome. And I think we should definitely, in fact, we will plan that second one where I think it would be so fun to talk about,
Yeah, yeah,
business and some of the entrepreneurial parts. So we'll get that on the books. But
absolutely.
um, until then, thank you for being on the show, man. I appreciate you.
All right, thanks, Ethan. Appreciate
All
it.
right.